Today I'll be describing the relationship between Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin. Paul Gauguin was born in Paris on June 7, 1848. His father died on the journey to Peru, where Paul spent most of his childhood. Paul enlisted into the French Navy for some time and then later on became a stockbroker. In 1873, he married Mettie Gad and had 5 children with her. Vincent van Gogh was born in the Netherlands on March 30th, 1853. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a minister, and his mother, Anna Carbentus, was an artist. Vincent had to start working at a very early age because his parents were struggling financially. He got a job at his uncle's art dealership where he fell in love with art. Vincent van Gogh dedicated part of his life to religion. He studied the Bible and forced himself to memorize passages out of it. He wanted to be a preacher in a church, and just as he was setting off to do so, he met Paul Gauguin. Van Gogh saw that Gauguin was capable of producing art that would speak to a modern society. Gauguin, however, saw Van Gogh as a valuable connection to the art trade. The two artists exchanged paintings. Van Gogh sent 2 studies of sunflowers in exchange for Gauguin's On the Shore of the Lake Martinique. This exchange started their friendship and set into motion the events that would eventually lead to the creation of the Studio of the South in Arles, France. Van Gogh and Gauguin left Paris in early 1888, both in search of destinations that would inspire their art. Gauguin moved to Brittany, where the rough landscape and pleasant life appealed to his desire for a simpler and more primitive existence. Van Gogh left Paris's cold gray weather and went to the sunny south of France, where he found his interest in light and color. Van Gogh settled in the town of Arles and rented a home called the Yellow House, which would serve as the Studio of the South, and invited Gauguin to join him there. In the months preceding Gauguin's arrival, the two artists both exchanged letters outlining their creative strategies and painted frequently, producing works such as Van Gogh's The Poet and Gauguin's Vision of the Sermon. Gauguin's arrival in Arles on October 23, 1888, signaled the inauguration of the Studio of the South. The two artists lived there together for 2 months, and Gauguin had an intensity that Van Gogh described as excessively electric, as they debated aesthetic influences and working methods and sought to refine and maintain their individual artistic identities. Both artists began to experiment with compositional techniques derived from Japanese art as well as the symbolic language of color. Each artist allowed his identity to emerge, the relationship developed, and creative competition began. Van Gogh saw himself as a monk or disciple, spreading the word about a new art, taking the leadership of Gauguin. Van Gogh, who painted very rapidly, applying thick coats of pigment, preferred working directly from nature. Gauguin, on the other hand, preferred to work from memory, building up thin layers of color in a slow, methodical style. Testing their theories, the two artists painted a number of identical styles side by side. In the ancient Roman cemetery known as the Allées Scampes, Van Gogh worked with characteristic speed, quickly producing what he called a study of the whole avenue entirely yellow. Gauguin proceeded more deliberately, creating a more abstract piece featuring 3 women of Arles, whom he referred to as the 3 Graces. Later, the artists both produced different results in their depictions of the proprietress of the local café, Gauguin's Night Café and Van Gogh's the Orsini. As winter came, the two artists were increasingly confined to the tiny yellow house. Their aesthetic debates intensified, and the tension of living and working together soon became too much, and Gauguin began to speak of returning to Paris. At the end of December, Van Gogh threatened Gauguin with a knife, then cut off a part of his own ear. Gauguin fled and never saw Van Gogh again, but the story of their friendship was not yet over. Despite the events of December 1888 that brought the Studio of the South to an early end, the relationship between the two painters continued until Van Gogh's death 19 months later. In letters and sketches, the artists continued to explore the same issues raised during their time together in Arles. In fact, one of Van Gogh's first projects following his breakdown was to complete a replica of sunflowers which had hung in Gauguin's bedroom in Arles. Gauguin continued to make reference to the debates and hard-earned lessons of the studio of the South. Combining his Caribbean imagery with Van Gogh's signature sunflower, he painted Caribbean woman directly onto a cabinet door in the dining room of the inn where he was living in Brittany. In many ways, this image represents Gauguin's abstract of the past and his hopes for the future. The regeneration of art represented by the sunflower could only occur in exotic equatorial empires or the studio of the tropics. After Van Gogh's suicide in July 1890, Gauguin focused all of his efforts on realizing the studio, and he departed for Tahiti in the South Pacific in April 1891. Following Van Gogh's death, Gauguin lived another 13 years and was a witness and participant in the growing mythology surrounding his friend. Critics began to speak of Van Gogh as a victim to the artistic cause, one of the isolated geniuses who populated the artistic pantheon. Van Gogh began to receive the attention that Gauguin himself pursued. Critics even described him as a disciple of Van Gogh. Ready to further his own career, Gauguin stepped up in his efforts to craft his own persona and founded the exotic and primitive, the very identity that Van Gogh had been shaping. His break to the South Pacific was interrupted by a return to France in 1883. This furthered his goal. There he created many of his signature masterpieces. Even though Gauguin was thousands of miles from Arles, Van Gogh's influence remained in a series of late canvases featuring Van Gogh's beloved sunflowers.